left,
So this is a
right.
really interesting episode of SipTalk. It went in a direction I wasn't quite expecting it to, so enjoy it. And while you're enjoying it, if you wouldn't mind throwing us a like, it really helps with the YouTube algorithms. It helps us grow as a podcast. So if you can like, comment, share the podcast, subscribe to the channel, I would be ever grateful. Thank you very much. Enjoy. This is Sip Talk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, let's go.
Cheers.
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 Quick clap to start. I gotta open this beer. It's getting warm.
No, you're going with beer. I'm going with whiskey tonight.
You're going with whiskey. We're switching
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah, some old Evan Williams. What are you drinking? Coors?
Yeah, out of the golden can too.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know the last time I had a Coors, it wasn't a Coors Light. So
Yeah.
there was that.
Banquet beer.
That's it. I just felt like drinking a beer I haven't had in a while, and tastes just like I remember it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I figured we'd touch. Basically, I had this thought that went through my head earlier, and obviously we did a pretty good job nailing the negotiation, but I just kind of really want your opinion on. I think there's a lot of things that are going on right now where people are kind of losing their tolerance for just anything. People are unable to just kind of endure. And given there's certain things going on right now, there should be some pushback for. I definitely think that, and I think it's a good time, and I'm happy to see a lot of this happening. But it also, I think, what it's led to is what's going on now is just people haven't had to put up with much adversity in their lives. And, from what we're talking about, the Olympians, um, offing themselves. But I just, you see where I'm going with this? Or am I just crazy?
No, this is a pretty common theme that you see it more coming from the conservative side of the political sphere, where and it's usually a claim that's lobbed at more left-leaning people,
Well,
where
they have more to lose, and they could say, just deal with it as it is. You tolerate it.
but yeah, but the common criticism is that younger people today are less able to tolerate adversity and things that don't go their way, and a lot of times you'll see the prevalence of anxiety and depression disorders among, I would say, both of us are in our mid 30s. I'd say if you take 5 to 8 years younger, you see a pretty significant uptick in the prevalence of diagnosed anxiety and depression disorders. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. I've got two main theories, but I want to hear where you're going on this.
Well, I think in terms of I said it's my pussification theory that for the last few decades we've just been breeding people not into adversity and telling them everything is perfect, and they expect that at 25 years old or at 28 years old or at 21 years old that life is going to be peachy, and they're not going to run into these big decisions that they have to question their life as it is. When anybody who's got a few decades on them realizes that life is always changing, you're kind of dealing with things as they happen. And if you look at things that happen as challenging your life altogether, maybe that's a reason why there are more suicides, as we were talking about before.
All right, so I've got a theory as to why that is. Why they take 5 to 8 years and younger from us, and you see that real market change. I have a theory as to why that is.
But
But
what
before I throw mine out there, what do you think the cause of that is? Let's just say we agree that that what you're saying exists. what do you think the cause is?
That's a good question, and that's why I thought it'd be good for us to talk about it. Like where, and then how do we backtrack and just toughen people up for fuck's sake?
All right. Well,
But
let me give you my theory on this then, since you're devoid.
No, let me think on it because I really want, before you throw what your theory is. I want to pinpoint my own decision. Maybe we'll come together on that. But I am at a loss. I don't know, and that's why I'm bringing it up. What's your theory? What scotch are you drinking, by the way, or whiskey?
Evan Williams.
Okay, it's a go-to. I like Evan Williams.
Yeah. Yeah, remember the taste test we did 10 years ago?
More than a blind taste test where
Yeah. It started saving you about $20 a bottle.
Very true. Blind taste test. Evan Williams against Jack Daniels, and I think we tested each other blindly.
Yeah, I walked into a room. I walked into a different room. You poured 2 different shots and then didn't tell me which one was which. And then I did the same thing. So neither of us knew what we were drinking. We both said which one was better, and both of us picked Evan Williams.
Yeah, I mean they taste really, really, really similar. They're both bourbon, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean they taste.
There wasn't a huge difference between the two, but both of us picked Evan Williams
over Jack Daniels. I don't think Jack Daniels to me is not a. Jack Daniels could be a well whiskey as far as I'm concerned. You stack it up against other whiskeys.
Oh yeah, but it's not priced like a well whiskey. Evan Williams is priced like a well whiskey. Jack Daniels is priced at $28 to $35 for a 750.
Yeah, and that's brand recognition, things like that. All right, sorry.
So my theory as to why the slightly younger generation to us is perceived as softer and may actually be softer.
Okay, but you concede, so I
what?
come behind you on this a little bit, but go ahead.
Okay, so I blame social media, especially Facebook, for this. And the reason for it is when we were coming up, elementary, middle, high school, there was no social media. We didn't really have any way of being able to compare our lives to other people's besides directly interacting with them face to face. When we either saw them in school or when we hung out with them on the weekends or whatever it may be, the only way that we could see how other people's lives were was by interacting with them directly, which means that we got to see more or less the whole picture of what their lives were like. Not selected bits and pieces that they posted for other people to see, but we got to see how things really were.
Well, do you think you knew more or less about people when the only way into their lives was physically?
You knew more about less people.
Okay, I will buy that. Although you didn't have the access to a fucking photo roll of somebody's last decade like you do now.
No, but it's again, you knew less people, but you knew them better.
Okay.
And so also there's a selection bias inherent in social media where people aren't going to generally post the boring, the mediocre, or the truly shitty parts of their lives on social media. They're not going to share that. So
What do you take pictures of anyways? You don't take a picture of your shit breakfast that turned out like crap.
Right.
Go out of your way. And, yeah. Okay. So
right. So the thing is, when you with people being raised on social media from essentially, there's kids that are on social media from the day that they learn how to read, 6, 7, 8 years old. They've got a Facebook profile. They're doing it. I know Facebook's term of service at one point were 13. I don't know if they've changed that. I've never been on Facebook, and thank God. But I think that it leads to whenever you're on Facebook or whatever, and all you're ever seeing are the highlights of other people's days, it can very easily lead you to think that other people are leading more successful and more interesting lives than you because you're only being exposed to the good parts of other people's lives. And your sample size is bigger. So if a good event occurs, let's say once every week or so, if you've only got 10 friends, then that's 1.5 good events per week that you're going to be seeing from other people.
Yeah.
But if you're friends with 2,000 friends, now you're seeing a good event 3 or 4 times a day. And you're thinking, man, all these people are just having, like, everything's going right for all these people. and here I am just trudging along in whatever job I'm doing. So it's very easy to compare your level of success against basically the top selection of success of a large sample, and it's tough to beat that. So it's very easy to feel inadequate when you're being compared against everybody else every single day, and you're only being compared against the top 10 scores of the 2,000 people or whatever.
Sure, but this doesn't fit against your timeline. This
Yes,
is
no, it absolutely does.
well,
How old were you when Facebook first came out?
21 maybe,
You would have been 19.
2006.
So when I was in college, I started college fall of 2004. I was 18.
Okay.
And that was the same time that Facebook came out. Facebook came out midsummer, late, I think probably first semester of my freshman year. So the way that Facebook worked is initially it was only for, I believe, Harvard. And then it caught on really quick with Harvard. And so they expanded it to another small group of schools. So it went from Harvard to maybe 10 or 15 other schools. And that
Yeah,
was like the first wave.
I've
It
seen.
caught fire from there. And then it went to another wave of like 50 or 60 schools. My school was in the second wave. And I had no idea what this was. People told me about it. And I was just like, oh, that sounds terrible. But not to go into the history of Facebook too much. The point that I'm trying to make is when I was 18 and you were either 18 or 19 is when Facebook first hit. So we were already in a lot of ways more along the lines towards being an adult than being kids when it happened. We didn't spend our adolescence exposed to social media. By the time it came out to us, we already had a lot of the tools and experience to know how to deal with what was going on the site.
We've already experienced real life. We've already had to fucking shovel driveways when 1,500 of your friends have plows in their driveway or live in a tropical area. So yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you, but I just don't know how there's not some type of mechanism inside the human brain that people are just like, people don't want to work. I can't imagine having a kid now and trying to get that kid to shovel the driveway, or God forbid, I hire a neighbor's kid to shovel a driveway and he gets hurt and the neighbors sue me.
Well,
I mean,
that's a separate
shoveling
discussion.
a fucking icy driveway.
But
I think that's that unheard of for
the
that.
answer to your question about mechanism of dealing with adversity is it's just like any other muscle, where it has to be exercised, and you don't want to face tremendous adversity. It's like going to the gym, and if you're built like me, trying to bench 500 pounds, not going to happen. But if I start by benching,
500 pounds either.
all right, well, whatever, you get the point.
Yeah.
Is you don't want to lift too much at once, but if you do little exercises, little pieces of adversity every single day, then you get stronger and stronger with it. And eventually, if something big happens, you're like, well, this sucks. But you've got the mental muscles to deal with it are already built up. And so it doesn't break you.
I like that. That fits in with my cold shower theory, where I've been taking ice cold showers lately. And I just think it makes everything after that a little bit easier. And I kind of like the challenge of, and also I don't take fucking 10, 15-minute showers when it's cold water. I'm pretty much in the shower, rinse, lather up, rinse off, get the fuck out of there because it's cold as shit. But it is, just dealing with a little bit of being cold, I feel like probably will help me out this wintertime at the very least.
But so that's my thought, is that again, with Facebook and people being able to have access to all this information out there, but no real mediation. There's no, like, if you're a 10-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid or whatever, you haven't developed the skills to be able to understand how everything that's shown to you online is not a true representation of what reality really is. And
I like that word.
And you also, because you have access to all these people, you can get confirmation for whatever condition you have. You can find someone that will agree with you. You can find basically enablers in any community. So instead of having to build resistance and say, well, tough shit, and move on with your life, you can find people that'll be able to reinforce whatever preconceived notion you had that it's not your fault, that there's somebody else to blame, or whatever the case is. You'll find someone to reinforce that view, even if it's not healthy.
Yeah, well, but somebody made a comment just now about parents being at fault too, and I certainly believe they are, because their kid fucks up, or their kid's not good at baseball, or their kid's not good at soccer. They're there coddling the kid, telling them they really are good at soccer. It's just maybe, I don't know, maybe not their time or something.
Well,
But people just not getting the fact that, like, they're not within their skill set. They need to move on, or fucking work hard and improve.
mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, yeah, and there's definitely some. You can definitely point to some parents and say, "Look, you need to be harder on your kid about it." Not in a mean way, but there's times where you just have to say, "Look, this is one of the tough lessons of life, where things don't always go your way, and you've got to find a way of kind of accepting that, and then deciding how you want to deal with it. Of either like if you're going to quit something, have a very good reason to quit it,
yeah,
or pursue on through the difficulty, and know that over time your hard work will result in you being better at it, and this feeling will not last forever."
like, this sounds like a parenting 101, lesson. Like, this sounds like parents are directly involved. Do you think that people in our generation, or a half generation ahead of us, are just shittier parents?
I think you could
I,
make that argument.
I think that they might be trying to be better parents. And I have a thing in this office and I noticed it last year, and maybe a year and a half ago tops, but I noticed this a lot, that I called it baby bird syndrome. Is that I'm not breeding lions and hunters and people that are going to go after what they want, because everything's been given to them. I felt like I've given too much, and I have people come to my office to help me print something. I mean, to me, that's like, why are you coming to me to fucking, you're showing me that you're a moron? That's
Yeah.
really frustrating like, it's literally demonstration that somebody's unable to figure something out, and they don't go to Google, they don't go to the person next to them, they don't go to maybe another colleague, they go straight to me, and instantly I'm just like, oh man, like, this person can't figure things out. I didn't go to fucking college for printers. I just know how to use Google. I know how to use fucking YouTube. But I think parents probably, trying to make their kids' lives a lot better, have probably made them a lot weaker people. I
Yeah,
think,
and a lot of it's well intentioned, where they want their kids to succeed, and so they kind of overhelp,
yeah, yeah.
which
People don't figure it out on their own, and that's what happens here. Is I give people all this training material, I give them all these resources, and then and then when they're not successful, it's because of me. I'm like, well, you didn't read this, you didn't watch these videos, like, you just assumed it was there. You never had to go after it yourself. Like, I read all these articles, and I type summations up, and I put them in our notes here. Videos that I watch, I put them in a shared Google Drive for people, and a lot of people don't watch them, and they don't even go externally to find this stuff on their own anyways.
yeah.
I mean, but that's a parenting issue. That's a leadership issue. It's bad leadership on my end. It's tough to turn around, because I want to be a broker that advertises full service, great training, great resources. But I don't want to be the broker that, like, somebody came to me today to print something for them. I'm like, it's in the fucking, well, you're in front of your computer right now. No shit, I'm in front of my computer. I'm doing fucking 17 other things.
And this is something that you can do yourself. This is not something that you need my approval for.
I mean, my fucking head almost blew up today.
No.
But
No, it's like when I started at my firm, and I hadn't worked in public accounting before, and I was an intern, and they didn't give me very much training. They gave me some tasks, and they gave me, like, they taught me how to use the scanner, they taught me how to log in, they taught me how to get into the different programs. But when it came time to start working with the actual accounting software, whether it was QuickBooks or our tax prep software, any of the others, very early on, probably my second or third day, they just gave me a tax return. They said, "We want to see what you can do. See, like, here's a good tax return that should be at about your level. It's not too complicated. Go ahead and just work with it. And then over time, when like if I had a question or whatever, a lot of times they would say, look at what we did last year. Google it. A lot of times they wouldn't give me help. They'd say, figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Put some time into it. Look to see how this item was treated last year. And it got to the point where now when I'm doing stuff, I've been there for over 2 years now, but I very rarely have questions. I know that all the different places that I can look for answers. So I have fewer questions for the partners or other more experienced people, because I basically, unless I run into something that I looked and see that I think was done wrong the year before, or I don't have the information, then the only questions that I'll have are going to be kind of technical questions that are either partner level decisions in terms of when there's a gray area, how do we want to interpret something? But early on, my firm was very clear with me that we expect you to solve as many of your problems as you can on your own.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I need to start backtracking on that, and I don't know. It's a tough position to move back on, but that's so now we have all these people in their 20s and 30s and teens that everything's been they haven't gone through much challenges, and now they feel like kind of the world's crashing down on them. They're not able to figure things out. Just how do you go back on that? How do you just kick people in the face and say, get back up or step out of the race, man?
Well, I think from your perspective as a business owner or whatever, I think you've got the right idea, which is kind of take the safety wheels off and have much more of a sink or swim approach and say, I will give you all the tools that you need to be successful. It's up to you as to whether or not you do the reading and you put in the work. And the other thing that I would do is have some kind of a mentorship program where you take maybe not one of your senior agents, but you have somebody that's maybe been here for 6 months to a year, maybe a little longer, that knows what they're doing and has been successful, and say, you, day one agent, you're going to be working with this guy that's been here for 8 months and has been successful. If you have questions, ask him.
Yeah. No, and we do a lot of that. We do a lot of that. It's just, it's so fucking frustrating.
But that way you can make it so that way the only questions that you're fielding are the ones where it's actually a decision that you have to make when it comes to how do we negotiate on a commission or something like that.
I don't want to say, why are you wasting my time? I'm the boss. Like, that's a really shitty perspective to have. It's really diminutive, I feel like. So, but it's difficult for me to deliver that message. Like, yo, like, you could just figure this shit out. Why are you like when the printer jams, somebody comes running in my office. Oh my God, the printer's jammed.
Go fix it.
Like, I'm supposed to stop what I'm doing. Like, go online, look at the user manual, get the fucking diagnostic of the printer, and figure this out. But how am I able to figure that out? And I'm
going to do the same thing that you're going to do, which is look at the printer, take it apart if I have to, and if that doesn't work, then fucking Google.
But how come that's my go-to, and that's not the go-to of fucking 50 other people?
Because, well, part of it is probably they haven't worked a job where they've been empowered to make those kind of decisions.
No, possibly, yeah. I mean,
and that's something where maybe on your onboarding or whatever, when people come in, you say, look, I'm going to give you a lot of responsibility and a lot of freedom to run things how you want to on your own. That means that I'm not going to offer as much assistance as you might have been used to at a prior job. I'm going to be here to assist you when it comes to getting a deal through so that we can both make money. And I'll help you with all these training materials and whatnot. But when it comes to kind of day-to-day operations,
but a lot more than that. Not just day-to-day operations, like, we're out of toilet paper or something like that, figure it out. But, we're out of paper or the toner cartridge, but literally every aspect in life. That's what I need to train people to do. And
well, here's a great way to put it from a leadership and boss perspective. is when someone comes to you with a question that is something that they should be able to figure out themselves. What I would come back to them and say is, I want you to pretend that you're the boss right now. Pretend you own this company. What decision would you make?
Exactly.
And then have them make that decision.
I think that's a good idea. So what are your thoughts? Because somebody made this comment, and this was kind of in line with where my mind was going, but the whole cancel culture thing that's going on right now, like, I feel like that's people that aren't getting their way, and they just want to fucking shut it down.
Well, yeah.
And like the cancel rent movement right now, which would be fucking great for me. Like, I've had a probably rougher than most, last 4 or 5 months.
Well, you're looking at between personal and office rent, probably about $15,000 a month.
More than that, but and that's just the fucking rent.
Right.
Plus, the electric is fucking building.
No, we're not counting any of that. We're just saying.
But it's a shit.
The space itself.
Yeah, it's a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And we get fucking 5,000 square feet in the summertime. The fucking AC's going on. Like, it's an insane amount of overhead. Cancel rent. If that made any sense fucking remotely, except fuck everybody and I win, I'd be on board. But I'm not about to fuck everybody else. Fuck the landlord. Like, I understand that if I don't pay rent for whatever amount of time, the building quality goes down. The fucking bathroom being out of toilet paper, people are going to have to bring their own toilet paper because they can't afford staff to check the bathroom. Everything shits in here,
I think we're not comparing. If we want to talk about cancel culture when it comes to some kind of item that's out there, usually we're going to be talking about some kind of expression, be it a TV show, an artist, speech of some sort, versus cancel rent, which is an economic argument. So I think we need to kind of separate the two out and kind of address each individually.
I'm just talking about people trying to change, people not being happy and how they're reacting to it. That's all. That's just my perspective. Rather than people enduring the tough times, what I'm.
Here's the problem with your comparison, though, is there's a difference between being exposed to speech or media that bothers you in some way versus something that makes an actual economic demand of you. So when it comes to cancel rent, that has an actual financial impact where on both parties, where I might not be able to afford to pay my rent and the landlord might be depending on my rent payment to pay his mortgage. So so I might not have much of a say in terms of whether or not I can afford my rent. If I just lost my job and my savings are gone or whatever, then asking for canceling of rent is really like me dealing with an impossible situation. Whereas trying to cancel culture when it comes to cancel this TV show, cancel this radio show, don't play this music on the radio or whatever it may be, has if I see something that's offensive or whatever and I don't like it, it has no economic impact on me. I can choose whether or not I'm exposed to it, and being exposed to it it's not something that demands anything of me, whereas rent demands something of me where I might not be able to produce that money.
So yeah, fair enough, but is canceling it a proper solution? Is that a real world actual solution that's not going to backfire on you in some other way? Like I said, if I don't pay rent in the office because whatever reason, I know that the building quality will deteriorate. And there's a good chance I'm going to have an agent that's going to come at me all pissed off because they went to take a crap and there was no toilet paper because they can't fucking man the guys that replace the toilet.
So your question about is cancel, be it rent or some kind of media or whatever, is that a viable solution? The answer to both questions is no.
I mean, now take something like we have this statue of Christopher Columbus in Columbus Circle. And I mean, I don't know anything about this guy. I always thought he was a good guy. He did some good stuff.
No.
Apparently, he was a real prick, and he just kind of came and took and conquered and whatever. I don't know the details. Not important. I'm going to say I've decided that everything he did was bad, and I never liked him. I was really indifferent to the fella. Now we got the Circle that's near my apartment, Columbus Circle. I'm pretty indifferent to the fact whether or not this thing comes down. But if we're just going to cancel it like it never existed, I mean, there's a lot of places in New York City that have been renamed. You get the Triborough Bridge, or which is now the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Bridge. It changed. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious is where these people get the passion and to just demand that it gets erased.
So,
and those are two different. We're talking the cancel rent, and we're talking the cancel. And I mean, I think there's a lot of fucking bad monuments that should come down. But I'm just so apathetic. Like, and
yeah,
also, like I don't want to have to knock it over. Like, that's a lot of work. That's how indifferent I am. So,
okay, but so I think when it comes, like, saying that taking a monument down, I think is slightly different from cancel culture in that, for one, that's public media. So that's an expression, kind of a tacit expression of the government, of an endorsement of some figure. And so if you can look at some figure, so without getting into the history, Columbus was not a good person, did not do a lot of good things, treated indigenous people horribly. And his history was whitewashed for a very long time. And so
which I think that's fucking wild.
Yeah, without getting into the history, people are looking at it and saying, you know what, now that we're more aware of what the reality of this person was, we think that it's probably not a good idea for us to have a government monument celebrating him in the way that it is.
So this is a different element of cancel culture. Something you don't like, and you're trying to make it go away.
Different between public and private, though.
I'm against cancel rent, even though I would really, really benefit. Let me clear this up. I'm super against the cancel rent because I think that's a bullshit thing. Now, the knock down the Columbus statue or all these Confederate statues, I'm for. But what I'm saying is, I'm still not going to be down over there tearing the statue down. And I'm not the one that's initiating let's do this, because I don't know, I don't have that in me. Something I don't like, I walk by these crackheads on the street every day. I tweet on fucking 311 on Twitter and shit, like, and in different newspapers. That's about as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to be the one that's going to. It's just
but
not there for me.
Again, let's try and not conflate things, because cancel rent is an economic thing, whereas if we're talking about,
there's something in you that's saying, I don't like it, it's got to go away. And that's why I said when we started off, right when we started, that I don't remember exactly how I articulated it, but like there are some good things that are happening right now because of this. But it's a societal, type thing that's going on right now that there's been so many people that haven't had to face adversity. I mean, is the Christopher Columbus news new?
To some people, yes.
I mean, living as a northerner, living in the South with people riding around their fucking pickup trucks with Confederate flags, I was just like, all right, this is a little retarded. I mean, I'm not gonna, like, I don't know. To me, as a white person, it's very clear what the Confederate flag is symbolizing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they think they're symbolizing, but I would say somewhere in the middle, if not more on their side, just by complexion alone. And I see, I see the other side of it. But I'm not, I'm not there pulling the flags down and yelling at them. Somebody's entitled to their own point of view if it's obnoxious.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of how you and I look at things. Is if I see somebody driving around with a Confederate flag on their truck, I just look and say, "You're really intolerant, and I don't want to interact with you."
Education, I think I would do my part to work on education, and
I won't even confront people about that because it's not going to go well.
Obviously, here, let me just refresh this.
While you're doing that, let me refresh my drink as well.
Come on, I need you to talk to me, James, because now we just got a blank screen here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I'll keep things going and then I need to get another ice cube. But yeah, so I think there are some people, however, that would be exposed to the Confederate flag or other monuments or whatever, and it could be a really painful reminder of things. And I can understand why other people would have a reaction different than my own.
All of a sudden, I mean,
No, there's some people that have been opposed to it for quite some time, and now it's really just that culturally things are starting to shift to see things more in their perspective. But
yeah.
again, I think you have to look at it. You need to make a really big delineation here when it comes to kind of issues of speech that you're exposed to without having say on. So Columbus Circle, if you have to get from one place to another, you might have to walk through Columbus Circle, or it's really
I go through
right.
Columbus almost every day. I didn't
Okay,
know
but
up until I would say about 18 months ago, I'd never heard anything negative about
okay,
Columbus.
but just follow me on this argument.
So I just want to, yeah, because
So if you talk about public monuments or somebody flying the Confederate flag off of their truck or something, that's putting speech out there in a fashion that it's difficult for other people to avoid. You're exposing other people to things that they may not want to see, and they didn't have a choice in the matter. It's the same thing why indecent exposure is a crime, because not everybody wants to see some nude dude walking down the street.
let's hold on though. Let me the whole thing about the indecent exposure thing. Now I get it if you're like under 18. But if I saw a real fat woman just rolling around the street, all dirty and naked and shit, I think I would just keep living life.
Yes, but the reason for things like that is because not every
But now people are scarred by it. Now people have to go
okay, but again, it doesn't matter what other people's reactions are. You have to look at it in terms of speech that occurs in the public sphere versus speech that you seek out. So when it comes to like I think you really need to make a difference here, where when you see people complain about a stand-up comedian doing a bit that they don't like, or a television show having an offensive premise or offensive characters, or music having offensive lyrics or anything like that, there's a very big difference between people trying to cancel those artists versus people expressing themselves in a manner that is much more difficult to avoid. Because if I don't like a certain artist's music, I don't have to listen to it because I just won't buy their album. I won't watch their videos on YouTube. I won't go to their shows. But if there's a public monument and I have to drive by it on my way to work, or someone's walking down the street wearing a Nazi like symbol or something, that's different because I didn't have a choice as to whether or not I was exposed to it.
I get, yeah, but I mean, maybe I'm just so kind of ignorant to just like so much stupidity and so many people that I just like fully to my core disagree with, that I just have to endure, and that maybe I'm a bit more immune to it than the next guy.
Right. But again, what I'm saying is if we want to look at cancel culture, you have to look at it in two different avenues. One, and for both of us, our answer to both sides of it is, I don't care. I'm just going to, I'll move on.
But there are people that are passionate. I don't have that much passion really about that.
No, we've got other things to do. But if you want to try and say, where do you draw the line in terms of when someone's making a request about canceling something and whether or not it's reasonable? I think that you draw the line at, do people have a reasonable ability to avoid this thing?
I don't know.
I think
because I could, I walk by shit every day that I don't like.
right, but do you have a reasonable ability to avoid it?
No.
Well, then maybe something needs to be done about it then.
But it's not going to be me. I'm going to do some tweeting about fucking crackheads.
Right. But that's also coming back to how I started off. You and I are generally apathetic to a lot of the problems because they don't directly affect us.
Yeah, sure. But, if someone I was dating was walking by through this area, I wouldn't feel. We have an agent here whose boyfriend picked her up the other day and then walked her to work today with a baseball bat. Like, because it's nuts out here. It's fucking nuts.
Yeah. So there you go. Maybe now you've made a case that maybe something needs to be done if there's a safety issue or whatever. But I would say that you need to evaluate whether or not when there's a request for something to be canceled or whatever, is does the general public have a reasonable chance to be able to avoid exposure to it if they don't want to? So when you look at public monuments or whatever, you can say, one, it's a government endorsement. It's a public endorsement of this thing.
Yeah.
And two, it's out in the public. So if you're going through that area, you can't really avoid it, versus a comedian or a television show or a music artist where really you have to be actively trying to find it. You have to tune into that show or whatever.
Yeah. I mean,
So if you're going to tune into something just to be offended, well, you know what? That's a you problem.
yeah. Yeah, obviously. I mean, you could avoid Columbus Circle. But I don't know. It's a weird time. It's just a weird time, you know. A lot of shit is changing really fast. I don't think humans have lived through a time of change at this speed as we are now. You think that's accurate?
The late 1960s come to mind. That's a common comparison.
Is it? And
yes.
Why? What factors are changing? What factors are changing so quickly in the 60s? Industrial?
So I would say look at the late 50s and early 60s and the type of culture that existed then versus the late 60s and early 70s. In the late 50s and early 60s, there was, I mean, neither of us lived during that time, so this is pure conjecture on both of our parts. But you had a much more leave it to Beaver kind of life in America. First of all, there were significant inequities, not that there aren't today, but the rights of Black people and other minorities were were more restricted than they are today in an overt way. It was written into laws. That whereas the racism still exists today, but it's more subtle and kind of sneaky, I guess.
In most cases.
Yeah. And the way that women were treated in the early 60s or whatever, think about how sexual harassment has changed in the last couple of years. So, but you can look at the sexual revolution, the invention of birth control, and the idea that you had, as a woman, you had to get married and you had to start having kids. And like women would get married at 17, 18, 19 years old and start popping out kids at 21 or 22. And then in the late 60s, you had the whole sexual revolution where people started to decouple the idea of sex and marriage. And that had really profound implications.
Yeah.
And
I think
I'm not saying I don't know whether it's good or bad. It's not my part to say. But I think that there was a tremendous amount of change, both in the way that America looked at the way it treated minorities, specifically blacks, and giving more protections like the Civil Rights Act, and the race riots of 1968, the protests against the war in Vietnam, and the sexual revolution, and a rethinking about the way that society views women's role within it. So, but I didn't live through that time, so it's hard to say. Right now, what we're looking at, I don't know how much change is actually going to happen. I think a lot of people are really upset about shit. But
I think that a decent amount of change. I'm saying change in the sense of, like, just, 10 years ago, we barely had iPhones. And we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now 10 years ago. I mean,
easily. We could have.
No, we could have, because we were doing this shit 20 years ago, basically.
Yeah, the Justin Show.
Yeah. Which is wild. But we were doing it, but the quality wasn't there. And, it wasn't at scale like you can do it now if you wanted to. So it's just, but I think that we're going through a lot more rapid change. You got fucking self-driving cars. You got, people can fucking teleport now. You get a microwave that heats your food in 1.5 seconds. And nobody has to work anymore because universal income. So.
Well, I think I think that's like universal income is a topic for another cast because I've done a lot of research on this and I've got some really interesting thoughts on it.
I really want to hear about this because it's difficult to wrap your head around. We won't talk on it now, but it's
No,
definitely.
I've done a lot of research on it. I think the whole idea of universal income is fascinating, but that's a topic for a different cast. When it comes to change for today, I think if you look at the George Floyd protests and everything, that was, I think, the perfect storm. One, you had all these people. This came right at the end of all the corona lockdowns. So you had all these people that have been cooped up
Yeah.
with nothing really to do. And then this video comes out that to any reasonable person is just outlandish. And you say, there's so much that is clearly wrong with this. And a lot of black people are like, we've been dealing with this for a long time. And now, like, y'all are finally realizing whatever. This isn't new, but they said, you know what, we'll take it. Like, thank you for the support. You finally get where we're coming from. And so you had all this pent up energy
Yeah.
coupled with a video that clearly shows something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, but yeah, and that's why it was. I actually think it's a great thing that's happening right now. The protests and the changes being pushed. But we talked about it before. Kind of the way the marketing on it is not great. In just terms of everything about it, and it's tough. But I like that it's a prevalent issue right now, and people are going to think.
But the question is, what meaningful change will result from it?
Well, I think I just think it's two different parties versus each other right now, and that's the way that it's being looked at, and nobody can win in the other person's eyes, and that's it's like trying to convince a stupid person. The person's never going to understand your point.
It's a good quote I heard is like, debate a genius and you may win some of the time. Debate an idiot and you will always lose.
It's the conversations that I have on a regular basis with people, where I try to explain things or we have like differences. The way that I equate it to is like a staircase. Like we need to get to the next floor, wherever it leads us. But we need to agree on the first step, and we need to be in agreement there. And then we need to reach the next step and be in agreement there. Some people can't even acknowledge that there's fucking stairs.
That's when you can't debate. And you're absolutely right. So if for the people out there who don't know this, I was a philosophy major, which everything in philosophy is about building sound, reasonable arguments. And what you're talking about in terms of saying we need to agree on the first step is exactly the first step in argument. Is if you're going to have a debate with somebody, you need to have a set of conditions that are agreed to by both parties. If you can't have that, then you can't have a debate.
Some people are so against, but that's what I feel like a lot is, especially with the Black Lives Matter. Like some people hear Black Lives Matter and they get upset, and they just fucking miss the whole thing. But that's the Black Lives Matter campaign needs to be aware of the people that it's going right over their head and they're irritating. They can't just shove it down their throat even further.
Well, I think the thing for the people that get viscerally upset at the idea of Black Lives Matter, I don't know if there's messaging that's going to reach them.
Well, maybe, but unless you can come about it some way they don't expect on an emotional level.
If you've got, because to me, if you can't see the reason for Black Lives Matter and you can't understand why they chose the phrase Black Lives Matter, for a while I didn't get it, because my whole thing was I just said no lives matter. Well, like nothing matters. But
as a philosophy major,
yeah, just like everything at the end of the day, nothing matters. But the way that it was put to me by somebody was, if you're at a dinner if you're sitting at a dinner table and you've got 6 or 7 people that are at the dinner table, and one person's taking a whole bunch of food, and there's one person that doesn't have too much on their plate or whatever, and they say, "Hey, I'm hungry," and if the person who's taking a whole bunch of food says, "Well, everyone should be able to eat," you say, "Okay, that might be true, but it's not addressing the problem that I'm not getting enough to eat right now." So that's why I'm saying, like, Black Lives Matter is not saying that all lives don't matter. They do. But right now, Black Lives Matter because we're the ones that are getting disproportionately targeted by all sorts of injustices. So
Yeah.
yes, all lives matter, but one person's getting all the food on their plate and we've got to fucking pay.
No, it's true. That was well stated. And but my thing though is that, and a lot of people aren't even going to get as far as hearing you to say that, because what I'm thinking is there's a lot of good people out there that don't understand that, and it's not intentional. It's just that's their conditioning, and we may just need to wait for them all to die off, and just
Yeah.
keep the topic up over the next couple generations.
Yeah, and you have to look at it in terms of all change is incremental, and the people that are out in the streets, or the politicians, that the new wave of politicians that are really trying to put this issue as a core part of their campaign and their platform, they're the ones that are going to be doing the work and hopefully making some actual policy changes that are helpful. But there's a really deeply entrenched portion of people that are in power that don't want this to change.
Well, but they're also, most of them are, luckily, most of them are pretty old.
Yeah, but look at the way that police unions have responded to a lot of the changes that have been recommended in terms of how policing is done.
Sure, I don't have any idea. I don't know what I did with the police, except I've never liked the police. Growing up, everywhere we drove, it was 20, 30 miles an hour, if not double the speed limit. I've been terrified of the police, not for my life, but when I'm walking down the street and a police car goes by, I go, oh, shit, that's
Yeah. So imagine if you were black.
Exactly. And that's, I can get a taste of it. I can't embody it, but I can't know it to my core, but I definitely have a taste of it because I know how I react. So I can only imagine that feeling. That feeling sucks.
Right. So yeah, think about how the times that you've had interactions with the police, and any time that you felt that they didn't treat you fairly. Right. So now just imagine that times 2 or 3 or 10 times in terms of how unfairly you're treated, how disrespectfully you're treated. Because during the stop and frisk time in New York City, were you ever stop and frisk?
No.
Probably not. Why?
Yeah, I got pulled over upstate. I was doing a little over 70 in like 25, and which is insane. I don't even know how that was possible. Police officer pulled me, and I mean, I'm not making this up. It was like one of those back roads, like mountain roads.
Yeah.
I was doing a little over 70. Police officer pulls me over. I'm at 911. I cut the engine. I put on flasher lights. I undo all the windows, and I roll down all the windows. And just because I also understand what it's like to be a police officer. You don't want to walk up on a car. The windows were tinted also. I didn't want him to see the tints. But I want the officer to feel safe, and I put my hands on the wheel, my wrists on the wheel.
2 and 10.
Yeah. And he walked up and started talking to us. And he's like, do you have any idea how fast you're going? And I'm like, I wasn't really watching this. Just, it was really more by feel. And he goes, look, I know your car can handle it. Which probably it couldn't, actually. I don't know about that car.
Whatever the case.
He wrote me a seatbelt infraction.
Okay.
Is that not insane?
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm just,
Right, but yeah. So part of it is the way that you handle the interaction, but I'm going to say this. Part of it was this.
Like that's what I'm saying. because that's a complete opposite of what we're talking about right now. So,
Okay, but my brother. So when my brother was a junior in college, he was selling pot. And
which youngest or middle?
middle.
Oh, good friend.
And he was I don't know how much he was moving. He wasn't like a super big dealer, but he was moving basically enough to kind of pay for his supply. And at one point, I don't know, he must have like gotten somebody ticked, but they ratted on him, and so the campus security came, raided his whole dorm,
Well,
and ended up taking like,
and then ratted on
well, so what, it doesn't matter. The point is, campus security came, found about an ounce of pot in his room. He ended up having the police. He got charged, and he ended up with not even a misdemeanor. Like, he had a violation. He had to pay like a couple $100 fine, and he might have been like on like a 1 year kind of like probation thing, where like as long as he didn't get charged with anything in the next year, then all he would have the fine. And coming out of that, what he said to me was, "Thank God I'm white."
him. True. I mean, imagine if he wasn't white, he
Because
probably.
if he wasn't white, he probably would have been put in jail.
Yeah. I mean, especially upstate. He was upstate, right? He went to school.
Sienna.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's he recognized that like there's inequities in the system. He happened to be a beneficiary of it at the time,
Yeah.
but that doesn't make it right.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments. Let me look through some of these comments real quick.
While you're doing that, let me get an ice cube.
Somebody just said, "Are you paying attention to comments?" But yeah, I mean, somebody said about how people look at people of color. But I'm going to touch on that in a second. Actually, when James comes back. Progress is inconsistent, but there's progress is progress. Doesn't matter if George. I don't want to get into that. This country has a long way to go. The country definitely has a long way to go. We got a lot to. Somebody
What did I miss?
No, just these comments and about how George Floyd wasn't cooperating and just.
Even if he wasn't cooperating, it doesn't mean he deserved to die.
No, exactly, and that's maybe the officer didn't know he was killing him.
No, he did. Watch the video.
Progress is inconsistent. So I think what a lot of people don't understand, especially people of any color or pretty much anyone non-white, but there's a speaker I listen to a lot. His name's Simon Sinek, and he
Haven't heard of him.
Example. He's really got like mine. Talks about leadership and building communities and building family, building brothership and kinship inside your companies and things like that. But he gives this example where, if somebody walks into my office and say, "Tell me they're from LA," I don't think anything of them. Somebody walks in my office and say, "Tell me they're from New York." I don't. It's just another person. Now, if I was in LA and I heard a New York City accent, I would instantly feel comfortable with that person. Be like, "Oh yeah, I'm from New York," and I trust their recommendations on restaurants more. I would almost I have a bond with them.
Yeah, I'm following you.
Okay? Now, somebody from LA walked in my office here in New York, I wouldn't feel anything. If another person from New York walked into my office here in New York, I wouldn't feel anything for them. Now I'm in London and I hear an accent from LA, and I hear an accent from somebody in LA, I'm going to instantly have a bond with that person, instantly take their restaurant recommendations, instantly feel a certain type of way about that person, and almost be as if they're kind of part of my culture or somebody I can identify with.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with this is on the day-to-day, that's not a feeling that I can control.
No.
And for me, the voice alone, the accent alone, over the way someone looks, obviously, is what's building that kinship and the bond. But what a lot of people don't understand is that just inside your brain somewhere, you're reacting to how people look. And I think it's important that what we talk about now acknowledges some of that some of it you do unintentionally. You might say that you're not racist, but then you may do racial or racially injustice things that are fucking racist.
Can I share with you a really interesting experiment that they ran? A psychological experiment.
Yes.
Um, and this was done with both with the test subjects being across all races. So white, black, Asian, Indian, Latino, it doesn't matter, like across all races.
Mm-hmm.
So the test was really simple. They had a series of images. Some of them were just landscapes or pictures of inanimate objects. Some of them were pictures of white people. Some of them were pictures of black people. Some of them were, so they had mixed, like pictures of people of different races and then kind of just neutral landscapes and stuff like that. And so they would show the pictures and it would be very short, maybe a quarter second or a half second of the picture on the screen. And then you'd have a very short period to respond, less than a second. And you just had to respond good or bad on the image.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was that like images of black people were across all races were responded to at a much higher rate of bad than good. And that after an image of a black person was shown, that the next image, even if it was a neutral landscape or whatever, had a higher likelihood of being rated as bad. And so it's testing for what's called implicit bias. And this is something that, like, now there were obviously differences between the races in terms of the response, but even black people would respond with more negative ratings for other black people or images that came after black people images. Yeah, and so that's just kind of showing like kind of how society ingrains this racist view of people that aren't white.
Yeah, well, I agree with that because I'm aware of it. We just lost a lot of people, so they actually missed what you had just said about. And I'll just repeat it real quick. The study basically, people had a split second to say good or bad, and they were shown random images, but they were more prone to say bad when someone was of darker complexion, and then bad to the following image, regardless of their background or their skin color, which I think is wild. But that's why I think a lot of what we talk about now needs to bring awareness to that, mm-hmm. because it's not fair. You don't want to intentionally fuck someone over, but you also don't want to unintentionally fuck someone over, because then
and that's the thing is, like, most people don't want to be racist.
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of, I think, and hear me out on this, but I think a lot of the Black Lives Matter campaign is missing is that people don't think they're racist and they don't want to be racist, but they also don't want to change. So shoving it further down their throat that they are racist, they've shut off at that point. So they're not open to discussion. They're not open to hearing more about your opinion of them because they don't value it.
Right. I think you got a lot of points right on that one, and that's where it kind of comes to the messaging and the marketing with Black Lives Matter still remains a point that they need to work on, because you might even be able to get someone who doesn't feel like they're racist to be able to acknowledge that there are societal inequities, but if they start to feel like they're being personally attacked, then they're not going to want to engage. And you need to get them to realize that even if they're not trying to do anything wrong, that there are certain things that they're not even in control of that are still part of the problem. And being able to just make small steps in the way that people think can have a large impact over time.
Yeah, exactly. But back to my tolerance thing, I think, people's tolerance needs to go back up. And that means being racially tolerant and not reacting negatively to, especially when you see somebody that is different, and just being a bit more reserved and not ready to make action. I saw and given this was bad or good, but I'll give you a real life example. Last night, left the office. It was a FedEx truck, and this is a bad block. I've told you that before. A lot of homeless people.
Wasn't always that way.
No, it wasn't always that way. But now that the businesses are closed and there's all this free retail space, they can chill out from the retail spaces. But it's a bad block lately. No, it's FedEx truck was there. Back was open, and there's a dude sitting on the back of the truck, and it was like half open. And he's a black guy, and then the driver was in the seat, like filling out some paperwork or something. And I didn't get a good chance to look at the guy, but I just assumed that he was probably not a great fella, because obviously the majority of the people on the block would imply that he's not a great fella. But as I continued to walk, I realized that I hadn't really gotten a good look at him, and that really the only thing I clocked was really race. And I could have turned back around, because like my shit gets delivered in the FedEx trucks.
Yeah.
Like I have some skin in the game here, but I didn't have enough. I walked on because I didn't have enough information, and I wasn't going to turn around and be like, make a fool out of myself and do some double take, peek my head back around the corner, solely based on a racial thing, or actually afraid that it might have been only a racial thing, because he could have been somebody, stealing shit out of the back of the car,
Or well, yeah, and that's where like you didn't have a chance to look at the uniform to see if he was dressed like one of the homeless people on your block, or if he was wearing a FedEx uniform and was just like the assistant to the driver.
No, he definitely was not wearing a FedEx uniform. I got that much. But it wasn't. I didn't have enough in my head to turn around, and I don't know. It's. You just got to be. You just got to be careful. I feel like, and aware and cognizant, and you don't have to be. Being racist isn't a choice. I think it happens very automatically for people, but
well, it's taught in the way that it's taught varies depending on the person. Some people are raised with racist parents, but even people that don't have racist parents will still, like, if society as a whole is racist, if they're exposed to media that has an implicit bias, then they will gradually build racist views without even wanting to.
Well, remember, we lived in South Carolina through the Obama election.
Yep.
It was wild, because that was the first time I ever actually thought about racism, was listening to, because I love listening to talk radio, listening to the radio down there versus listening to the radio up here was eye-opening. And I realized just how fucking wild it was that race was such a big topic in the South, whereas in the North, obviously we knew, potentially the first black president, but it was just wild that race was such an issue in his background and his fucking birth certificate and this, that, and the next. But it really was a totally different. It just played out so differently in the South than it did where we were from.
And it continues to.
All right.
What are the comments saying?
Well, someone has a comment about what do you think? What do you think of the media industries capitalizing the B in the word black, but not W or B in white or brown? Which
they are now.
But that's interesting.
You're actually starting to see that capitalizing B for black and W for white. You're starting to see the W being capitalized as well.
Which is wild, though. I don't think, for me, it's not a title. I don't think that much. I don't think it should be. I don't think either one should be capitalized, because I don't think we should be drawing that much. It shouldn't be the topic of the sentence. I don't think it's a a noun. I think it's an adjective, and oftentimes a poorly used adjective. But I think when you capitalize it, it becomes part of a noun.
Well, what I would say is I don't have a strong opinion on it either way, as long as you're consistent. If you want to capitalize B, capitalize W. If you want to use lowercase, just treat. I don't know. It's that's one where I haven't really put too much thought into it.
Yeah.
I don't know the arguments on either side.
No, I don't either. That's
So
quick speculation on it.
I think that's a distraction from the real issue.
Yeah, I would say that. But let me just loop this back to tolerance. I think people should tolerate a lot, but I also think people should have a moral ground where they don't tolerate really bad stuff.
Well, where do you draw the line?
That's a tough line to draw. I probably draw it further back than a lot of other people. But also, I will often stand up when I see something that I think is really, really bad. And seldomly, because a lot of times I think things will work themselves out on their own. But especially like conflict in the office is usually not. I do hear people sometimes in the office say things they don't realize are racial or racist, and I have to correct them. Or sometimes I pull them aside or send them a text like, dude, you can't fucking say that. Like, we get fined if somebody just passes by and hears it. But also, it's not the fucking right thing to say. I've heard some crazy stuff, but yeah, there's we have a super diverse office, and I see, I've been exposed to a lot more cultures than I ever have.
How many different languages are spoken in your office?
Probably 12 to 15, if not more. Which I always thought that was a super cool thing.
I do too.
I love the fact that how diverse it was. I love learning about people's cultures, and I look at everybody kind of equally different from me, but skin color thing.
Well, and that's actually that's one of the solutions to racism is exposure. And you see this all the time, where people that used to be very, very racist, when they actually met somebody of a race that they looked down on or whatever, when they were actually exposed to what if I'm racist against black people and I'm then exposed to black people and I get to see that they're just like me, then the racism starts to go away because I get to see them as other people, not something lower. And you can see that across any kind of bias or...
It's wild, though, that does everybody just assume that someone different is lower? Is that like...
Well, I mean, when you look at something like white supremacy, yeah, it's very much like it's built into the name. But you'll see people like reformed white supremacists. And one of the things that helped get them to realize how terrible an idea it was when they were exposed to black people that weren't combative to them, that said, look, I get where you're coming from. I understand how you were raised and where you get this opinion, and bringing them around in a friendly way to say, look, black people are just like white people. We want the same things. We're all people, and we just want to be treated equally, and we want to treat other people equally as well. And there's a topic in philosophy and ethics about the difference of the other, and racism in a lot of ways is rooted in that, where instead of seeing other people like yourself, you see them as the other. And you can see this across a whole bunch of different things. It's rooted in nationalism, where you see people that are not from your country as the other, people that are not from your religion as the other, people not from your race as the other. So when you stop seeing people as the other, but as like yourself, then you see these biases go away.
Yeah. We delved on that avenue for a while, but I mean, we could go on for fucking hours.
Yeah.
As reasonably intelligent people. And
well, what do you say we look at respond to one or two more comments and then wrap it up?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea in terms of comments. Let's see. I need to read this article. Why we're capitalizing black, not just B. Why we're capitalizing black.
Okay.
But I'll check into that, and we get some other comments. Let's see. I mean, it's crazy how passionate people are. You know, I'll throw a comment in, but not, you know, just for the sake of stirring the pot. But yeah, it's about changing the mind of ignorant people who don't want to change. I don't know. You know, like I said, it's a tolerance issue. I think, yeah, I think that's what got us into this. And I do think there's stuff you shouldn't tolerate. I think there's a lot of things that we agree are wrong and they need to be changed. But like, it's weird where some people draw that line and where some people don't draw that line.
Well, yeah, and I offered an opinion, which is like public versus private, where if there are things that you don't have a choice but to be exposed to, that's where you can start to make and advocate for changes. But when it comes to private expression, where it's avoidable by somebody who doesn't want to see it, then it's a lot harder to make the case that something should be canceled or restricted.
I think education plays a core role in all of this. Just, you know, the type of education people have and exposure to diversity, which you talked about earlier. But it's a tricky subject. It's a really, you know, things aren't perfect. And what I'm saying is we got to deal with a certain amount of imperfection. But then what I'm also saying is some imperfection is bullshit. And like,
that's just an excuse or a cop-out.
It needs
to
be,
not have to deal with the problem.
Yeah. But I'm also, but it's a fine line to walk, because that's, you know, now we go from fucking shoveling driveways to Black Lives Matter, and it's just wild. You know, it's just wild how fucking ignorant and stupid people are, and it sucks.
Well, and you also have to accept that there's a certain percentage of people that you're never going to be able to reach, and you have to set your goals realistically and say, let's find the people that we can change their minds and get them on board with the changes that need to be made. And then there's a certain portion that is not going to go along with anything, and they're just going to get drugged through history, kicking and screaming along the way.
Yep, and typically those are older people. And
yep.
The older people die sooner than younger people, so I guess the population has that going for them. All right, dude. I'll catch up with you later. I enjoyed having drinks. Enjoy the rest of your whiskey.
Yeah, let's make next Tuesday. Let's talk about UBI.
I think that's a pretty cool topic. So I'm totally down for that. So I'll catch up with you later.
Yeah, do some research and some reading on UBI. I'll do the same, and let's make that our Tuesday topic.
All right, cool, man. I'll catch you later.
All right, cheers.
Yeah. Wait, you still here? You still watching this? Man, you are dedicated. To show your dedication, you did like this video, right? You're already subscribed to the channel? Thank you so much. Have a great day.